Yo, 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 hello, and welcome back to the Lenko Show. I am your host, Alex Lenkowski, and today I am actually joined by my pet Pooch. He's currently upstairs in the office with me, chilling out. See if I can tip my screen down there for those of you on YouTube. He's just kind of sat next to me, being a good boy at the minute. So obviously it's very, very cold at the minute. So he's been out. Normally he chases squirrels around the garden while I do this sort of thing. So we've come up to the office and he's followed me up here. Anyway, I'm not just joined by the Pooch today. I am also going to be joined by Josh Reilly, who is currently waiting patiently in the waiting room. Josh is a PT, he's a trainer, he's a coach. He's been doing it for quite a while now. He's quite a young coach, does a lot of CrossFit as well. And he works with Chris. So he's in the same gym as my brother. So I'm going to ask him a few things about my brother, see if we can dig in a little bit deeper as to what's going on with him. Because obviously he's not been on the show for a little while now. So it's pretty much a one-man army at the minute. But yeah, I've been speaking to Josh. I spoke to him a while ago and I thought it'd be very interesting to get him on the show. He's a very interesting guy. He's a very smart guy. And we were speaking about sort of kids' athletics and the general physical development of today's youth when it comes to PE and things like that. He had a few interesting perspectives, and that's undoubtedly something we will go into today. Anyway, I'm not going to mess around too much longer because I am keeping him waiting. So let's get right into it and welcome him on. Right then, Josh, welcome to the show. I want to start in style. So before you even say a word, my first question for you is High Rocks training just CrossFit for pussies?
Yes. Let's go in.
Excellent.
So,
Good start. We've offended people from your very first sentence. I love it.
I knew that's what you wanted, so give everyone what they want. I think in terms of high rocks as a sport, it's obviously modelled on the same methodologies CrossFit in terms of the fitness side of things, but with a very watered down skill element. And it is obviously just about capacity and engine work. But a friend of mine alluded to high rocks the other day in a sense that he's an endurance athlete and he's pretty confident that he could go straight into high rocks and wipe the floor with a lot of people that are already quite high up in high rocks. So as a sport and in terms of credibility, it's probably not the, I guess, the most credible sport in that sense.
We'll dig more into that. But first off, just tell us a bit more about yourself, your own background. So obviously, I mentioned in the introduction that you do quite a lot of CrossFit. You're a personal trainer. Yeah, just tell us a bit more about yourself and your own background and what gives you the authority to nail down that high rocks is for pussies.
Well, I'll let you guys be the judge of that. I started coaching when I left school. So I did my GCSEs, left school, and decided that college wasn't for me. So I didn't apply for college. I was down at my local gym and I just decided that I wanted to do personal training or coaching because I saw one of my mates' brothers do it and I thought, wow, that looks great. The guy literally trains for a living and helps other people do it. And I was quite passionate about training and sport at the time. So yeah, I did an apprenticeship, started coaching from the age of 17. And then a year and a half later, found out about ProFit, which is where I work now, and basically joined a gym in Preston. I'm originally from Urmston in Manchester.
Where I live.
Yeah. Did you know that already, by the way?
I don't think so. No, it might have been one of those things that gets mentioned to me, but you know what? Like, you know what I'm like. I'll hear something, I'll go, "Oh, that's amazing," and then I'll forget about it 5 minutes later.
Yeah. So actually, very close to where Alex lives, I grew up and spent a lot of time. And it was the gym that is on Eden Square, you know, the Sainsbury's shopping centre, the Anytime Fitness. That's where I first started.
Yeah. I'm sure my South American listeners will be exactly, yeah, I know exactly where you're talking.
Yeah. But yeah, so I found out about ProFit and they had an opportunity in Preston. And because I hadn't been to college and I still wanted to continue my education, I decided to apply for university at the same time. So I moved to Preston and I did a degree in sports science, an undergrad degree. And in that 3 years, I also built a business in Preston, which has continued to develop to the point I'm in now. I took a year out of university after my sports science degree and just to develop my business, spend some time on my business that I hadn't been able to do while I was at university. And then I applied for a master's and now I'm second year into strength and conditioning masters and still personal training at a new facility called ProFit Preston, which has been opened for coaching purposes. So that's like my business and education side of things. In the time that I've done all that, I've pretty much moved through 3 sports. I came into training wanting to be a bodybuilder, grow big muscles, get tanned, ripped on stage, and that passion soon died as I realized what it was all about.
I really need, if there's anyone listening to this that knows how I can get like a little sound effects board to like boo and hiss and then and stuff like that as you say things, that would be absolutely epic. I'd love to just mess around with that. Sorry, carry on.
That's all right. So
you decided to quit bodybuilding before it got stupid.
I didn't even start. I spoke to a coach that was shy, and he basically gave me a crazy like 2 sessions per day plan and like a ridiculous high calorie diet that ruined my gut. And it must have been about 3 months of that. And I was like, I've had enough. That's it. So another coach that I knew was a power lifter, and I like the look of lifting heavy weights and resting for long periods between lifting. So I pursued that, and I didn't go quite far. I got an opportunity to do a couple of European championships in powerlifting at 17. And I didn't take those opportunities just because it wasn't my passion at the time. I just fell into it. And then when I moved over to ProFit, training was a bit stale. And I just started doing some CrossFit because that's what the guys did in the team trainings. And I fell in love with CrossFit, and that's what I've done ever since. And now pretty like competitive, I pretty much train to compete in CrossFit, as well as loving it as well.
So, like, I would say, I mean, you pretty much did things slightly the way around to me. I mean, well, say the other way around. I did uni, then went into PTing, whereas you decided to go PT and then just think, oh, fuck it, why not do a degree at the same time as starting a business? Which, if anybody knows, starting a business is hard. Building a name for yourself, building a brand, building a reputation, building a client base is really fucking tough, especially when your livelihood depends on it. What kind of crazy ass, what were you at the time? 18?
Yeah, 18, or just turned 18, yeah.
What kind of fresh 18-year-old thinks, do you know what? I'm going to start a business and go to university at the same time? Because I think a lot gets made of the mental resilience and the lack of work ethic in today's youth. And I would say it is certainly evident in the majority of people that you see. So why did you decide to do it that way?
To be completely honest, at the very first point of applying to university I was jealous of everyone's social life in college. So I think when I went to work straight after school, I realized the hard way that it was quite isolated. There was no like class banter or like mingling with people in the same way. I turned up to work, had to be professional, like learn to take on new clients, learn to build relationships, which was absolutely like invaluable in terms of learning how to create business, but also looking after people and how to coach basically. But then every day I'd go on my lunch break, if you will. We didn't really have a lunch break at the gym. You just went out for lunch when you needed it. But I'd go out to the square, and it'd be all the college guys that I did know and I was friends with. They'd all be on the playground, not the playground, like the yard outside the shopping centre, you'll know the square, like grabbing their food, bantering, chilling out, socialising. And I'd have to go back because I had an appointment in half an hour. And I missed that for probably the 1.5 years, 2 years, or whatever time I was there for. And then when everyone was applying for university, I was like, I can get in on this. Like, the problem with not going to college is that it's harder to go to university. So I had to go through a bit more of a process and start as a foundation year, which soon got skipped and stuff. But originally it was the social element. But when I got to university, I guess actually that never happened because I started building a business. So there was no going out till 2, 3 a.m. like socializing with everyone. It was just go to your class, finish university, go back to the gym, train people, wake up the next morning, go to the gym, go to class, I never got the social side.
And I think that's the side that a lot of people actually seem to go to university for these days. So like, why do you think you didn't do that? Like, why do you think you did decide to do like both difficult things? Like, what makes you different?
That's quite a hard question to answer, because first of all, to answer that question, you have to think you're different. And I don't feel like I am different to any of my peers in the sense of going to university and doing hard things. Also, because when I got to university, I surrounded myself with people that were also either doing athletically hard things or working in the same way. However, what makes me different to the people that wouldn't do both at the same time, I think, is probably a case of feeling responsible to create like a big life for myself. Like, I want to set up something where I can succeed and grow and hone in on like mega skills that other people might not be able to do or might not commit to doing. And the reason for that is probably because, well, when I grew up, my dad passed away when I was young, and I grew up with my mum in the house and my little brother, and like I felt a certain responsibility within that capacity that made me feel like I had to grow up quicker, if that made sense.
Yeah.
And therefore the responsibility was that I did the hard things because they had to be done. And I think that carries over to everything else that you do, not even just in home life or looking after yourself or training, but everything that you do, you take the same attitude.
Do you know what? I really like that answer, because I think the reason I asked that question, like what makes you different, is I've been watching SAS Who Dares Wins. I love watching that shit, but I've been watching the Australian version, which is a lot more full on. It looks a lot more like a lot closer to what it would be in the real situation, as opposed to like the really watered down, just like advanced boot camp climb on ropes kind of thing that you see. Or like the proper Australian one looks like the real shit. You like the handling life grenades, chucking them, doing proper drills. But one of the questions that they asked towards the end, when they're being kind of interviewed by all the DS, is what makes you different. And I think in order to answer that question well in the way that you've just done, you do have to have a sense of self-awareness to understand that you need to think of yourself as being different to everybody else. Whereas if you just see it as the standard of it's what you do, and you alluded there that growing up you felt a lot of responsibility, like obviously you lost your dad at a young age, which must have been incredibly tough for you as well. It's what you know. And I think if it's all you know, it's just who you are. It's not like you're making a conscious decision to be different, unlike I think some people seem to do. Would you say that's fair? Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I agree. And I have this conversation with Chris, your brother, or I've had this conversation a few times, in terms of you would never wish adversity on yourself in a way of having to go through some hard things. But I think whatever we do go through that is hard, there's two ways you can go about it. You can deal with it in a way that makes you stronger and grow from it, or you can deal with it in a way, I think you will always grow from it in some way, shape, or form if you take the lessons. But there's another way where short term you might take the beating and feel really, really, I guess, victimized in a sense. And the sooner you can get out of that mentality, the sooner you're learning and growing. And it's always a big learning curve.
What do you think the difference is to those two? Because I think when you're presented with a challenging situation, it's kind of like that's a yes or no type filter, isn't it? You either deal with it or you go a different way. Like, what do you think the main factor is in determining which way you go with it?
I think there's two things off the top of my head. And the first is obviously choice. If you're taking responsibility, you choose to go one of two ways. And I think everyone will have an emotional response of some sort. And then off the back of that, it's to simmer down and you choose which way you go from there. But the other thing is exposure as well. I think the more times you're exposed to that without someone holding your hand all the way through it, I think the better. And I'm not talking about like losing someone as extreme as that, but I'm talking about like failures or things not going your way or adversities coming up in business, training, whatever it may be. and you getting back up sooner rather than later. So there's first of all choice, but then there's also an exposure to it. The more you're happy to get exposed to that without fear of failure, etc., and just try again, the more you can train it.
Yeah. So it's almost like either fronting up to it, facing up to the reality of the situation, and then you say like making a choice, taking action, deciding what to do next, or you can kind of, don't know, pull the blinkers on and ignore it. And that, I think that in that situation, most people probably tend to go down the path of finding other little coping mechanisms, and because they haven't dealt with it, it's just kind of bouncing around inside the head, and then that leads to a whole wave of absolute fucking carnage.
Yeah.
So front up.
I do think as well you can compartmentalize these things, go and run with it and be the strongest person you think you are without dealing with it. And yes, you might see crazy success because you're using all that energy and that pain as a driver. And then later on in life, not that I can talk from experience because I'm still young, but I think you see it later on in life, people then get beat down by that very same thing that brought them up in the first place when they finally have to face it because maybe they've rode that wave for long enough.
Yeah. I think that's one of the things why I'm so addicted to SAS Who Dares Wins, because it's literally like a condensed version of what our job is essentially, isn't it? Where you're taking someone who is just a person, flesh, flab, mushy mess, mentally a little bit like, ooh, up and down. And then it's just a real condensed version of, right, punching them into shape, which obviously we can't do. We can't say we do, but
behind closed doors.
Yeah. Things happen, right? But yeah, you essentially get to see the person go on that journey and become a much stronger, more robust person, don't you?
Yeah.
I was going to ask, how important is it, do you think, in terms of the balance of, because I know we're going to be talking about physical and mental training anyway, so we might as well just go all in on it now. How much do you think the physical training affects the mental side, the psychological side, in terms of mental health, well-being benefits? Or would you say, is it possible to just do the mental health side of things and purely focus on that and ignore the physical side? Can you get all the mental benefits by doing that alone? Or is it a case of you have to have some form of physical activity to reap the full benefits and maximize the potential? And obviously we're biased as fuck, aren't we? So
yeah, so biased in a good way. Biased because it's the right thing.
Do you know anything? Whilst you're thinking about that, I remember I got into an argument with someone a short while ago, which is typical.
Yeah.
I shared a research study with them, and this particular person went straight back. I'm not reading it. There's a conflict of interest. I was like, no, there isn't. Scroll down to the bottom of the research paper, conflict of interest. There's nothing. There's no conflict of interest. They're not selling a product. There's nothing else going on. I was like, what's the conflict of interest? And he was like, these researchers have been lecturing and delivering talks and selling their talks and kind of lectures based on their own research. I'm like, that's not a conflict of interest. That's called teaching. That is literally saying what the research fucking says. Like, you can't say to your lecturer at the end of the day, just go, oh, sir, sorry, I can't listen to a word you've said. You've got a conflict of interest because you believe in the stuff that you've researched and that's evidenced by science. Sorry, I just had to.
And you're getting paid to do it.
Yeah, and you get paid to do it. So massive conflict.
Researchers shouldn't get paid. Right. I think I have an answer. I think there has to be some level of physical training, and that doesn't have to be in the sense of playing a sport. Or I think if you're going to be mentally robust and mentally strong, there has to be some level of activity involved in training you to that point. And you're not always going to come across adversities that make you feel like you have to get mentally more resilient or mentally stronger. And a great way to create those experiences is by doing it in a gym setting or a field setting or wherever you get your activity from, whether you're a runner or a weightlifter or whatever. and doing the things that are really hard. However, I do also think there has to be a mental side of it always, even if you're doing the physical side of things, whether that's just a case of journaling or reflective thinking or whatever it might be, or having a conversation with someone about what you've already done, because there has to be some level of reflective practice in order to get stronger and better. And everyone will do that in at least a small way, whether it's positive mental, like reflective practice, or negative. They might tell themselves they were shit at that, or they might tell themselves they were really good at it, but they could do something better, or whatever it is. But yeah, I do think there definitely has to be a mental side of things where we're reflecting and thinking about what we've done and how we felt. But having a physical thing, I think, is also definitely necessary.
Yeah, I think it has to be a combination of the two. I think when you are physically downbeat, physically broken, at that point, that's where it's like a lot of the time people put up mental barriers, don't they? They kind of put the shutters down and you can't get through. Whereas if you physically drain someone, exhaust them, expose them to cold water, like get them wet, get them miserable, you get to see who people really are when they're actually physically suffering, because there's not a lot of energy left to actually put those mental barriers up. So it actually helps to kind of break someone a little bit more. And at that point, I think you can actually, if you're able as an individual to kind of voice your own thoughts or write it down, like you mentioned journaling, didn't you? And read it out loud, like it actually becomes real and it stops it from bouncing around in your head, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You kind of just exposing yourself to your own thoughts. And it's, again, I think I've spoken about self-awareness on this podcast like a million and one times. Is there a particular method you use for journaling and doing that yourself, or how do you go about it?
I've used many little techniques in terms of journaling. A lot of my journaling is gratitude and wins, but also it always comes down to a bit of reflective practice. I use these avocado and spice journals. I've been through a couple now, and they're amazing to write on. So if anyone needs a journal, just a line journal, they're quality, no endorsements. But
Send me the link, I'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah, I'll send you the link. It even comes with, check this out, a little bag as well.
Oh, mate. It looks like,
anyway,
just hold up again. It looks like it's got a turtle on the front cover. What's it called?
It has avocado and spice. Oh, the book has
the book, yeah, the actual journal.
Yeah,
it's got
different animals on them.
Oh, nice.
But anyway, pleasant writing experience, so you're more likely to come back and do more. But even if it wasn't pleasant, it's important to do. And I think even just writing down the things that you think that you are not happy sharing with the people that are around you as well. Like, we all think things where we feel either vulnerable or weak, or we feel like we need to get better, or we're not good enough, etc. And I think for me personally, writing those things down when you don't necessarily want to share them with your peers or your teammates or whatever it is really important. And then going back and rereading those things on a day where you feel a little bit better as well. Or when you're not feeling great, going back to a day where you've absolutely had a quality day and read down like what you wrote out that day, because it will remind you of the things that you are good at, or the things that you're doing well. And then on the days that you are feeling great as well, it's good to reflect on why you weren't feeling so great on the day where you weren't. Because we all do, and it's just how we deal with that off the back of it. It's okay to, like, we talked so like already about being like mentally strong and going through the walls and picking yourself back up, but you have to be okay with being vulnerable to be able to, progress and get through it.
When you like, I've heard people use that quite a lot. Like, you have to be okay with being vulnerable. What does that mean to people?
To me or to people?
Well, go with what does it mean to you? Because you can, like, people can take it in different ways, can't they?
Yeah.
Like, for instance, with me, like when people say, "Oh, you need to be vulnerable," I'm like, "What the fuck are you talking about? Like, what do you actually mean? I need to be vulnerable? I need to be soft? Is that what you mean?" So, yeah. Like, it makes me angry, because if people mean you need to be vulnerable, if that simply means you need to be honest and you need to be open, well, that's me anyway.
Yeah.
Like, I don't need to start crying on your shoulder to show vulnerability. Like, I am exactly what I'm showing you. Like, there's no guards here. There's no, like, you can strip me down, tear everything you want off me. You get the same fucking thing every single time. So I think the concept of vulnerability, and like, especially now, so like, obviously men's mental health is absolutely huge. Like, men commit suicide far more frequently than women. It doesn't mean we mentally suffer more, but I mean, we are more inclined to use lethal force when it comes to suicide, but the evidence is clear that like men have mental health issues and there is a way to deal with it. So number one, how do we do that? And what does it actually mean? What does it actually look like? So yeah, go ahead. The term vulnerability.
So being aware of yourself is, I think, being vulnerable, but like not covering that up. So if you're having a day where you're not feeling as strong or as powerful as another day, because we all do. We have productive, like mega productive days, and then some days we're just not as productive as those most productive days. So like there's something going on to stop you from being as productive, if productivity is the metric to measure. And it might be because you feel a certain way, it might be because your time constraints, whatever it is. But if you always set that expectation of being so productive, then you're not going to feel, you potentially might not feel good enough on that day or strong enough. And therefore, I think it's okay to write about that stuff and to be like, right, I'm not here today and this is why, and this is how I feel. But ultimately, these are the things that I need to get done. When can I get them done? But it's not necessarily like, oh, you're having a down day, like cry about it, don't do too much about it, and then tomorrow hopefully everything's gonna be all right.
Hope is not a strategy. I can't remember who said it, but I feel like it's a good quote.
Yeah, and fitting.
Um,
So what are your views on that, Alex? I'm curious to hear what you think about that.
about which bit in particular, what vulnerability is, or
No, what my take there on vulnerability is from a journalist point of view.
I think it is pretty much as I think. So you said it's a case of being self-aware and not covering it up. I think that's the most important thing. Like, first off, you have to have a level of self-awareness to be able to think and react or behave in a manner that is useful towards the standards, expectations, and goals that you set for yourself. And journaling is a really, really good way to build that self-awareness. Like, even if you just sat down and go, right, how did I generally feel today? I felt pissed off.
Yeah.
Okay, well, why? Like, why did I feel pissed off? You go, well, the missus said something that made me feel a bit meh, a little bit flat, or something else happened, or like you can actually get to the specifics of it. It's go, okay, well, is that going to be an ongoing problem? Yes or no? No. Okay. Is it dealt with? Do I need to say anything? Yes. Okay. What should I say? Blah, blah, blah. Done. You boxed it away. You've dealt with the problem. You understand how to problem solve. And then, I mean, like Matthew Davis Spooner, who I had on the last podcast, on one of my previous podcasts, about 2 shows ago, he said to me that I've got a terrible poker face. I was like, no. I can bluff, I can blag, but I don't see the like day-to-day life when it comes to working with my clients and speaking with people and being honest. I don't see the point. It was one of the things that kept me away from social media for so long. Like, I didn't want to post, I didn't want to be on it, I didn't want to be involved because of the level of fakery on there.
Yeah.
It wasn't me. I wasn't interested in playing the game, and I'm not bothered about being all, oh, look at this. Like, fuck off. Make it interesting, make it useful, or disappear. Stop pretending that you're awesome at everything because you're not.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I think like not covering it up, I think is a huge, huge part of it, because as soon as you start to do that, I mean, I suppose when I think about this, like one of the things that I find it really hard to deal with people, like trust isn't easy to come by. And there are very, very few people that I actually trust. Very few. Like, you could probably count them on 1 or 2 hands maximum. Like, if I was to say I trust you wholeheartedly, for me, that's a big deal. And as soon as people start covering it up, I feel like I pick up on it pretty quickly. And as soon as I pick up on it, there's no way back, because until that barrier comes down and it's removed, you've got absolutely no chance. And I feel like that should be, I don't know why I feel like it should be a standard for everybody. I'm going to say that. Yeah, it should be a standard for everybody. Like, don't hide who you are.
Yeah.
I want to ask you a very personal question. What's been the most alarming thing that you've written down in a journal that you would be happy to share? Like maybe something where you've, like, I don't know, either had a really shit day or a really shit spell, and you've just thought, fucking hell, like, what is going on here?
Yeah. It's a hard one. I think it's the thing that I reflect. Okay, so I know what it is. I won't go into exactly how it's written or the words that we use from an emotional standpoint. One, because I probably won't get it right exactly, and two, because it'll probably be easy to explain. But I lost my dad through suicide, and it's something that I would obviously always change. Like I would always much prefer to have him around. I lost him at a young age, but I was old enough to have met him and to socialise and travel him, etc. And understand who he was, or start to understand. And the reason that I reflect on this is because he dealt with certain things that he had to go through, and because he had to go through that, he lost the opportunity, because he chose to take his own life. He lost the opportunity to do the things that he really wanted to do because he was trapped by these things. So I think a lot of the reflective tasks or reflection that I go through in my journaling is reflecting on how I can never get to that point, which I never think I will. Like I'm quite strong-minded in the sense that I understand when mental health wise or like happiness wise, I'm not where I want to be, but where I want to be is always quite high. And to be below where I want to be is still quite far above the point that I'd need to be to maybe commit suicide. Although I don't know that because I've not been there myself. But I think the point I'm trying to make is that whatever I do on a day-to-day basis is to fill the potential of what he could have done, or at least do it for him, because he didn't get the opportunity to do that.
I'm really sorry to hear that, by the way. I had no idea that he committed suicide.
That's okay.
I was speaking about men being more likely to do it anyway, and then fucking hell, you go and drop that one. Can't believe it. Gutted.
Just to make you feel bad.
How old were you at that point?
I was 7, 8 years old.
Because I can't even. I think this is the thing. Like, you know, when people say, "Oh, I've got complete empathy," I understand. I understand what you're going through. I'm sorry, mate, but I have no idea. I haven't got the closest fucking clue as to what you could have possibly been going through at the age of 7. Because, I mean, I'm very, very fortunate that both my parents are still around, and like even now, that you can't imagine what it would be like actually losing one. So, yeah, to hear that and to think about what it would have been like as a 7-year-old to go through that. I mean, I don't know. This is the thing. Like, you never know what's going on inside someone's head until like all the barriers are down and they're completely open about it.
Yeah.
Do you think your ability to front up to that and understand it and kind of break that down has helped you become a very efficient, effective, strong-minded, strong-willed, physically strong, emotionally strong, mentally strong human being?
Yeah, I'd put quite a lot of what I'm good at from like a productivity, mental fortitude, setting goals, etc., etc. Like I want to be a high achiever, if you will, in the areas of my life that I choose to spend time. I would put a lot of it down to going through that experience. Upon reflection, at first I didn't. when I went through university for the first 3 years and built a business, that whole topic of losing my dad probably ate away at me more than it ever did previous to that. But that was just more of a reflective time where I was understanding it and coming to terms with it again. And then after that, I'd say since that, I've been able to realize that that is probably what has driven most of my choices.
And is that where, do you think that's helped kind of put you on the path of self-development, coaching other people, helping other people?
Yeah, massively. I think if you can, I think there was, I don't know, it was Hoppo, there was someone within ProFit that was actually talking about something from a sales perspective, but then they alluded to the fact that when we interact with people face to face, the goal is always to leave the person feeling better than they did coming into the session. And it's not necessarily always the case. If you've got an athlete coming in and you're there to give them a hard session, and the goal is to make them work really hard in that session, off the back of the session, they're going to feel better. Obviously, physically in that session, it didn't feel too nice, but the goal is to make them a better athlete at the end of the day. But if you've got like a general population person in front of you, you're likely going to want to make them feel better than when they came to you. And I think that's what fueled the first, like, why I wanted to get into coaching, as well as obviously seeing it as a pretty cool job, getting to help people become better versions of themselves, which is the longer term goal. But even just from a session to session basis, making people feel better about themselves or about their day or about training because they didn't before.
I think the amount of times that I've had in the gym back when I was working with more general population, and they came in and then they'd leave the gym going, bloody hell, it was like counseling that. And I'd be thinking, I barely said a word. Like, I maybe asked a couple of questions, but that was it. But that's what I'm liking it to. Like, so why do you think, or like, would it be fair to say that, I don't know, I remember seeing a few things recently which just points to a continued increase of mental health disorders, whether it's anxiety, depression. I think there's medications we're running out for depression and things like that as well, where more and more people seem to be struggling. And obviously with it being winter now, like days are shorter, nights are longer, it's darker, you're getting less vitamin D, probably less time actually physically being outside, which I think the mental, physical benefits of that alone are completely underrated.
Yeah.
Do you think it's fair to say that as a human race, as a population, like we've got more and more people struggling with anxiety, depression, mental health? And if so, why?
I do think so. And I think there's multiple reasons why, but the main one that you hear quite a lot is the fact that social media is so fake, as you alluded to earlier, and people posting about their best life and they get likes and views and comments and following or whatever based on their lives being picture perfect, aesthetically pleasing, like they're living a higher life. And it's because we're comparing because we want to be like that, or we want that. Whether we truly want it or not is a different story, or whether we want everything that goes into that lifestyle is also a different story. But it's what we think we want. But then there's the other side of things where things like tasks and day-to-day activities are getting a lot easier for us because technology is advancing, or we can pay people a lot easier to do stuff for us. There's so many more services available. Whereas previously we've had to do a lot of things ourselves. And I think there's two elements that this has an impact on. And that's one, the fact that we're not doing as much ourselves. So therefore we're not like learning and growing as people as much because we're just offloading that to other people to do. And two, I think it comes down to us wanting things that are easy for us to have, rather than realizing that the best things come from a little bit more hard work and patience. So for example, like we want quick results in the gym. So we go and instead of going to the gym, we want quick results in terms of fat loss. We go and get some surgery, but we haven't changed anything apart from taking a bit of tissue and flesh off the body. And therefore we still have the same mental health problems, Whereas someone that spends 3 years grinding it out in the gym, learning how to train, learning the kind of person they truly are when it comes to changing their diet and changing their attitude to exercise, and changing even down to changing their environment and the people they spend the most time with. Like, who's going to have a much better psychological well-being and outcome? Person A that's gone and got surgery and doesn't feel any better about themselves, or person, and by the way, I'm not saying that's always a wrong thing to do, but or person B who has put in the graft over 3 years or whatever the time frame is to become a better person, to realize more about themselves and to become more self-accepting, whether they achieve the absolute end goal that they set themselves or not. I think person B is going to be a much happier person.
So I think one of the common things is that if you are a little bit anxious, a little bit depressed, and like people just seem to be able to go to the doctors, get a sick note, off work, bang, here's some medication. That seems to be the typical way of dealing with it now, as opposed to actually stopping it at source. Do you think that's a useful way for people to go about it? Is there anything that people should be doing differently? How can we actually change it and, I don't know, kind of present a cure?
Okay, so before I answer that, I'm going to give you a quick example of a member that won an award at our gym at the Christmas do on Saturday. We had a Christmas party and we gave out some awards. And one of the awards was the most life-changing results. And this lady had lost 25 kilograms of body weight, and obviously life-changing in a physical way. But the main moral of the story for this lady's, or the reason she won the award, and the reason that she's getting such good results and so happy at the minute, is she had a conversation with a friend, and they were both in a quite poor mental space. And she had a conversation with a friend, and her friend did exactly what you just said there. She went and got medication, went to the doctors, they dealt with it in that sense. This lady, she wouldn't mind me naming her, but I'll refrain.
Go on, give her a shout out. Give her a shout out.
So her name's Kate. So good work, Kate.
Well great job, Kate. Fucking
yeah,
Kate.
It's quality. But anyway, she went down the route of training and doing everything she could before she had to take any medication. And the way she did that was she came to the gym, she turned up, did her PT sessions, did all the classes. After her session, she walks around the car park to cool down and get some extra steps in. Like, she went the extra mile. But when she came to us, like, it was a new experience. It was scary. It's not just black and white. This is what I need to go and do, so I'll go and do it. Like, there's obviously still like an element of having to learn, having to develop some skills. Obviously, she wanted a certain result and she trained to get there. She became the kind of person that could lose 25 kilograms, whereas previous to this journey, she wasn't that person, because obviously she was 25 kilograms heavier and not currently happy with how that felt. Now, the reason I've just talked about that is because I do think it's not a case of, if she just lost 25 kilograms on that day where she decided she wanted to change, nothing would have changed up here. She wouldn't have felt happier. And I think the reason that she did feel happier is because she trained elements of positive psychology, which people don't really talk about, or she might not have known that she was doing. But she came to the gym, set some big goals. She started training in an environment around people that were a lot different, or maybe not a lot different. I'm judging there because I don't know who she spent the most time with previous, but she started spending more time with people that train every day, that look after their diets, that all have aspiring goals to get fitter and stronger.
I would frame that. I like where you said what you're saying. I would frame it as she's spending more time with achievers.
Yeah.
I would go into that because, like, I think there's a significant difference between being in a room with a bunch of people that are sitting around bitching about stuff and whinging and going through the same continuous cycle, versus sitting in a room with a bunch of people that are thinking, how do we solve this problem? How do we solve this problem? How do we get to the next level? How do we get to the next one? I think that's the way that because obviously, like, it's not fair to kind of bracket everybody in the same thing and shoehorn them into that. But if you say, like, she's training with a bunch of fucking achievers, like, that's a different level. I like that.
Yeah, and that's one of the biggest things, isn't it? Who you spend the most time with, not just because of spending time with them, but what you're learning from. Like, the social norm for those people is probably a little bit different to the social norm of people who aren't achievers. And also the language that they use is probably going to be quite productive in terms of conversations that you're having with people, especially if you're always talking about, oh, what have you done this week to get closer to your results, instead of talking about, oh, should we go for a beer and eat some pub food?
Yeah. Not
that that person was doing that, but it's kind of the opposite end of the spectrum, isn't it?
Yeah.
But then I think, I don't know if I alluded to this before, but I do think there's definitely a benefit in terms of doing stuff for yourself as well. So the more action you take in terms of doing something to help yourself grow and achieve certain goals, the more we reinforce that we can, and that we instill self-belief and self-acceptance, and that's ultimately the stuff that makes us stronger and gets us out of the place where we're scared of trying new things and scared of taking the action that we need to be successful in what we want to do.
Do you think there's a bit of I don't want to say a bit of an issue, but do you think it seems to be a commonality whereby people feel anxious and they don't feel like they ever should feel anxious? Like if I was to look at it now and analyze the situation and go, right, well, I'm going on in a national championship game to kick a winning field goal or to kick an important field goal, or playing in a team for the GB national, playing in a game for the GB national team, and I'm going on to make a winning kick or something like that. It's like, well, do you feel anxious? Well, yeah, like a little bit. Like if that's not there, I'm not human. Like that, and then framing and same for you, like going into a CrossFit competition, like before you compete, do you feel a little bit anxious? Like, well, yeah, if you're going to use that word, I suppose I probably do, because you're asking me like, does my heart rate go up? Do I get like a bit of a pump of adrenaline? Do you get like an increased amount of focus? And do you expect? And it's, if you're not able to deal with that initial hit of adrenaline, you don't know how to process it, and then you can go, I think, one of two ways. You can either get on top of it and control it, and again, my main technique for that is control your breathing first. If you can do that, you control your physiology, you control your psychology, you can continue to move forwards in a useful manner, not like I'll tell you this in a second. Versus if you allow it to get on top of you, and then you get in your own head and you start thinking, oh my God, what if this? What if I miss? What if I do this? Oh my God, what if that happens? And then you panic yourself with shitloads of hypothetical questions that are in the realm of possibility. There's a very real chance you might miss, something might happen, something bad might happen. That's cool. But then what? Like if you start panicking yourself by focusing on all those different things, and then you get a negative outcome and you go, oh, I knew it was going to be fucking shit. And then you continue on that downward trend and you understand that that's how you deal with your problems, you're fucked.
Yeah.
And I think there's a really good example. So again, I'm going back to SAS Who Dares Wins. They did a hostage rescue scenario. And one of the participants, she abseils like 100 meters down this building, in through the window, gets a paintball gun out. DS goes, right, you've got to go into that room. There's hostage, there's enemy combatants. Deal with the fucking situation. I'm not even joking. She went in the door and shot fucking everything. She saw, as soon as she saw something, she just went pop, 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 pop. Everything's covered in fucking paint. And it's like, what are you doing? You've just shot the fucking hostage and the man surrendering. And she's like, oh, panicked. It's like, no shit. Like, you have to be able to control your mindset in those situations. And like, obviously, for everybody listening to this, we're not all going into hostage rescue situations, but fuck me, do we have potential situations day in, day out that might cause anxiety if we don't know how to deal with them? And the answer to that is absolutely yes. Oh, yeah. I feel like I've got a load off my chest there.
That is quality though, isn't it? I think the more we can ride that line of like arousal is what they call it in sport, isn't it? But like excitement, and we can call it anxiety if that's what people resonate to. But like, to be worried about something you care for is quite important, and if you can channel it as excitement but not panic about it, then I think that's a really powerful tool. And that's where that self-awareness comes in again, because that lady could then go away and write about that or have a conversation with it, and she might be faced with a similar situation again where she can control herself, even though she's still quite panicked or quite excited is probably a better word.
Yeah. Because you mentioned before about exposure and that importance of repeated exposure to those scenarios. So I'm going to ask you this question. When you go into a CrossFit competition or when you go into any form of competitive scenario and you experience that level of arousal, how do you personally deal with it?
I think breathing's a big one that you talked about earlier, but then also to have a plan of action for the scenarios that could go well and could go wrong. I think the more of a strategy you can have, the less you think about what could go wrong because you're thinking about what you can do. So that's very specific to CrossFit, I think. But there's some workouts where you know exactly what you're going to do, and you go out and you stick to that as best you possibly can. I think the biggest teaching points are when you set the strategy and you try and deal with it, and then you get soon humbled by the fact that your strategy was completely wrong or you're not quite at the level you thought you were. And then in those scenarios, it's kind of dig deep and, see what you've got and keep moving. I did a pairs competition last week, well, not last weekend, the one before, in just past Coventry in Stoneleigh. And it was a competition where we both went out and we both carried a few niggles. I've had a back injury since quarterfinals last year, which is probably about April. And we went into this competition and I thought I was a lot fitter than I was. And we went into each workout with a bit of a plan. And Lani, fair play, smashed it. She held her own on all of the workouts. But physiologically, I was in bits. And I remember on the last workout, we had 40 worm squats where we had a 70-kilogram worm on our shoulder. And it was hard enough just getting that worm to the shoulder. But then once it's there, you have to squat it and stand it back up and squat it and stand it back up. And honestly, I can't say I've been in a worse place than that physically in terms of how much my quads was screaming, like mental state, like breathing. I was gasping for air. You can see on the videos, my chest and back are just doing this, like panting for air. But it's just knowing that you've got to keep on moving, no matter how it feels, and keep on going. And no matter, if you can't control it, don't worry about it. Just keep doing what you can control. And what I could control in that moment was picking the bag back up and trying a few more reps. And when it was an absolute no-go or I was collapsing, then put it back down and pick it back up again.
Do you have any specific phrases, any thoughts? Like, what's your positive self-talk like in that kind of situation? Have you got any specific trigger things that you go through and you think or that come to mind?
Yeah, I think I tell myself that it doesn't hurt as much as I think it hurts. That's a big one that I do quite a lot. Another thing that I do as well is, this is coming off the back of some coaching that I do with Matt Dewhurst, but I'm quite expressive with my facial expressions and my body language when I'm in a very painful place. And a lot of my focus is on, instead of how much it hurts or what I'm trying to achieve in the moment, it's more about, all right, can you just calm yourself down and carry on executing the task? And if you can put a calmer face on or slow down your breathing or be a little bit less erratic with your movement, again, specific to CrossFit, then naturally everything feels a little bit easier. And it's not going to feel easy, but it feels easier than it would if you were pulling a face and making it look really hard work.
Yeah. I like that. I like what you said there. It doesn't hurt as much as you think it hurts. One of my favorites is just, it will end. One way or another, it will end. Whether it's a good ending or a bad ending, it'll be over and then you won't know anything about it. The story of Will Smith talking about how when he's on a treadmill, there's two things that are going to happen. Either you're getting off first or he's going to die. It's it will finish at some point, whether it's a happy ending or not. Well, that's to be determined. It doesn't matter how you feel in the situation, because I think one of the recent phrases I came across was, it doesn't matter why, it just is. You're just in the situation, you're feeling what you're feeling. It don't matter. It's cool. It's all good.
And suck it up.
And yeah, suck it up, fucking breathe it in and get on with it. I think what you said as well about, this is something that everyone needs to understand. If you do feel a little bit anxious or a little bit on edge, I think your phrase, to be worried about something you care for is important. If you're not worried about something that you care about, you don't really care that much, do you?
No. I think that the two things there are willingness and courage as well. Like if you're, I think anything hard or difficult or scary or, that you care about, you have to be willing to walk into that. And then like it takes courage to do that. I'm trying to think of an example because those two words were in my head quite recently for a very specific reason. I can't remember what it was, but I think it was something to do doing something. Go on.
I kept interrupting. I was going to say, you keep thinking about it because you were saying, like, it comes back nicely to what we were saying at the start of the podcast, where the most important thing is to actually front up to stuff and face the situation rather than kind of put the blinkers on and hide from it.
Yeah. Joe, it was, I think it was a workout that I did on Saturday, and it'd been programmed with this in the sense of this workout is 5 rounds. The first round's going to be really shit. And then the other 4 rounds, you're going to have to repeat them and they're going to feel really shit as well. And the workout was a buy-in on an assault bike. So you have to do a certain amount of calories and you have to do 10-minute max pace plus 4 like revs per minute. So it's quite fast pace for that workout. Then it was a 2-minute AMRAP when you get off the bike of bar facing burpees and barbell thrusters. It was hang squat cleans, not thrusters. So from the hips into a squat clean, repetitive for like 6 reps each, whatever it was. And it was one of those workouts where you just knack your legs and lungs, and then you have to just get on with it for 2 minutes. And then every round, just, you can do it. So stick with it. And I really didn't want to do it. I was cold. I'd warmed up and my back wasn't feeling too good, although it was feeling all right. My mind was telling me it wasn't feeling too good because by the end of the workout, I felt great. But it was one of them where you just have to, I felt anxious about the workout. You just have to run into it. And I know it's only a small thing because it's a workout, but it would have been quite easy to back away from that and be like, you know what, not today, I'll do it tomorrow.
Yeah. And if you're ever faced with that situation, not today, I'll do it tomorrow. If that's your thought, you fucking do it today.
Yeah.
Like I had a conversation with one of my clients earlier this morning when I was training, and I was like, you're going to go for a run this week? And then we got into a relatively long conversation where it's like, she can see that I'm thinking, fucking run. Get fit.
Yeah.
You've got no reason to not fucking go and do it. And I think one of the issues was the expectation and the standard, the bar had been set so high. It was like, if I'm going to run, I have to be out for, like, obviously, so time was an issue. Time was a big problem in terms of fitting it in, doing the preparations beforehand, then rescheduling other stuff. And I was like, let's go for a 10-minute jog. Like literally 10 minutes around the block. Like, that's fine. Like if you accumulate 1.5 Ks in that time and you do that each day, that saves you. Like that's better than going, right, I'm just going to bust out 1 7.5 kilometer run, because you're actually building a habit. You're doing something sustainable because you can recover from it each day. Whereas if you just go out and do a 7.5 K run or a 10 K run, your legs are going to be fried. Your lungs are going to be fucked. You'll have an unpleasant experience that will take you an hour and a half and you're going to hate it.
Yeah.
If you actually just really dial it all down, lower the bar to entry, start doing, and in that 10-minute run, in that short workout that you're doing, or in that piece of exercise you're supposed to be, I don't know why I called it a piece of exercise, in that exercise you're supposed to be doing, you've started, and as you start, you get going, and eventually you find a rhythm. And before long, if it's not scripted, if it's not all written down, you might find yourself taking over and going for even longer than you were scheduled to, shall we say.
Yeah.
So again, I think, go on.
I was going to say, there's a film, I forgot what it's called. I think you might be able to tell me. It's an NFL-based film, and it's got Al Pacino in it. Is that his name?
Any Given Sunday, that one?
Any Given Sunday, his speech on that, where it's like inch by inch, like step by step. Like, I think that's always the case when things are hard. And it's hard to, that situation you're talking about there, it's really hard because you have to have a level of reflective, like, foresight in that to be like, it's all right not to do the absolute most. A lot of us are programmed to want to do everything we can to succeed. And I actually had a conversation literally before this podcast with Matt about this. And because I've got a back injury, and I've not got a back injury, I've got back pain somewhat, and I'm rehabilitating that. When I squat and the numbers are like quite high because my strength is relatively high, I think that I have to hit those numbers all the time. Whereas it'd be much more productive if I'm feeling shit to just back off the numbers by 20% or whatever, and just get the reps done. And I'll probably get a lot stronger by doing that than doing one top set heavy and then hurting myself and not doing the rest of it.
Yeah. I think that actually fits in. So the perfect scenario, right? This week, I've been doing quite a bit more running with the pooch. So went out, did a long run Monday, did another run yesterday. And after the session, so I've been doing like 2-a-day sessions. So it'd be like run, upper body, like long run, upper body session, day 2, short run, lower body session, day 3, no run, just CV stuff in the gym, back to an upper body session, and just following that kind of pattern all the way through. But anyway, yesterday I'd done the run, was in the gym in the afternoon, and I was like, my legs feel absolutely gassed. And then it was 5 sets of 3 to 5 reps of back squats. So loading up the bar, warming up, and I got to like, obviously like my warm-up sets are like 60, 80, 100. And then I thought, I'm just going to lay on 10 kilos at a time each side. So just jumping in 20s, jump small, like relatively small jumps, especially down the lower end. And I was like, I got to 120 kilos. And I was like, mate, that fucking sucked so bad. I was like, what is going on here? And then I thought, well, yeah, obviously the last couple of days will probably explain it. But rather than looking at my 1 rep max, and I think this is something that's important for everybody to understand within their training, that you might have a rep max. Understand, when was the last time that you tested that? If it was more than 6 weeks ago, it's almost irrelevant. Like, literally look at your workout plan. If it says 80% to 90%, you go through your reps and you think, you know, like my actual max today might only be 150.
Yeah.
So I'm going to work at 130. I'm going to go 135. If I'm feeling great, I'm going to push it a little bit. I might go 137, 140. But you don't have to be on that red line of your actual max every single time. Like, work to the level that you're presenting in the current format on that. How much bearing does that have on your CrossFit training? Because obviously a lot of it is pre-written as scripted. You got RX workouts, and then you might have scaled versions of that for other people that are doing it. How does that factor in with your own training? Like you were saying there, sometimes the smart thing to do is just back off a little bit and do the little bit.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think it's looking at the intention of the exercise that's in front of you and deciding how you can best achieve that intention. So if you take, it's a hatch squat cycle that we're doing at the minute. So for those that don't know what that is, it's back squats and front squats 2 days a week. The back squat volume is slightly higher, and it goes into front squats, which are like lower volume, but the weights are still relatively high. And at the minute, because I've done a lot of movement work, my mechanics have got a lot better, and therefore I've gained loads of range of movement. So like the intention of that exercise is to get stronger at back squatting. I'm currently not at my strength potential in back squatting because of where I've been over the last 6 months. So how do I get stronger? I move a relative weight to how I'm feeling on the day well for the reps that are prescribed. And then the next week, I do a little bit more. And the week after, I do a little bit more. Not go off your 1 rep max, even if the 1 rep max is for that cycle, and then batter yourself into the ground. Because accumulatively, as Matt alluded to in a conversation earlier, you're not just doing a 1 rep max where you've got a little bit of extra range that you have to deal with in that 1 rep. You've got like an accumulation of 10, 8, 6, 6, 6, 5, 5, 5 of that extra range, which is going to accumulate to quite a lot of extra range that you're not tolerant to yet. So I guess the moral there is to understand what you're trying to get out of that movement, and don't let your ego take over and be like, yeah, but if I'm the athlete that I say I am, I'm going to hit the weights that I said I was going to hit, because that's at a detriment rather than progressive.
Yeah, I think that filters in with, you know, when I see loads of people post exercise videos and they'll post themselves working out and it'd be like, oh yeah, it's just the start of the program. It's, I'm not there yet. It's like, well, it's all good, bro. Like, even if you were there, like, it's good shit. Keep going.
Yeah.
Like, you don't have to explain to me that you don't think you're at your potential yet. Like, what I'm seeing is good. Like, carry on. Like, own it. Just be like, yeah, I'm training, I'm working hard. This is what I've got.
Yeah. Almost justifying it before they've given themselves credit.
Exactly that. Exactly that. How much of a factor do you think that is? Like, not giving yourself enough credit when it comes to, I know we're on the theme of kind of like mental health, anxiety, depression, that kind of stuff, but even just self-confidence.
I think are you talking about a general theme? Like low self-confidence probably comes from giving yourself not enough credit. Because
No,
I do.
how much of a benefit do you think people would experience if they actually acknowledged some of the good things they did and gave themselves a bit of credit?
I think there's two things that the benefits are. I think they would get a lot more benefit from how they feel about themselves and what impact that then has on their training, because you feel good when you do things that are significant or like that are progressive, or you're growing, or you're doing better than you were yesterday. So to recognize those things, especially when they're small things that you probably don't see day to day. But I think another thing that helps when you give yourself more credit is you don't fear failure as much. And I think the fear of failure is what stops us from acting. So for my personal experience, I've maybe missed a few workouts over the last couple of months that have been like things that I would worry about with my back, and therefore I wouldn't be able to hit it with the intensity that I want to hit it. And therefore I'm scared of doing those workouts. Instead of just being like, well, I'm going to do it anyway, see what happens. And if it hurts, I'll back it off, or I'll stop and start again, whatever the solution is. I've gone, nah, it's a bad idea. I'll hurt myself. But all that was a fear of failing and fear of not doing well enough, especially amongst the team as well. Because we are competitive people, especially when you're competing in a sport.
When it comes to day-to-day life, general population, I think similar to you, I think it has a huge impact on self-confidence. And I imagine if anyone does struggle with anxiety, depression, actually acknowledging some little bits of success and things that they've achieved day in, day out. Because I know this is something I'm huge on, is like, actually, we mentioned before about the whole thing of journaling. It's gratitude, daily wins, and then generally a task list for tomorrow kind of thing. That kind of situation is a very straightforward thing to do. But when it comes to recognizing things that you've done and giving yourself credit, it's not always, it's not very easy. Like, a lot of the time, even if you've done something exceptional and everyone's on you going, oh, it's amazing, most people will tend to kind of push it off rather than allowing it in and being like, do you know what? Yeah, I am proud of that. That was mint.
Yeah.
I think it's even harder when you're kind of battling through the mundane day-to-day tasks and you don't feel like you've done anything exceptional at all, because you've essentially got up, got breakfast, gone to work, had your lunch, gone back to work, and then done whatever the evening routine is. Like, how can people start to dig out those little bits of self-praise and credit and become more mindful of that and use it to their advantage?
I think understanding where they've come from is a big thing, because if we are on a journey of making ourselves better mentally, physically, like socially, whatever your journey is, I think reflecting on where you've come from at the start and how you felt and how you feel now, even if you're at the start of the journey, if you've made actions or steps towards that higher self or whatever you want to call it, then you can go back and look at where you have been to where you are now. And that's a huge win in itself. But then also just sometimes giving yourself something to be like, yeah, I've done that really well today. Like, set yourself some small actionable steps that aren't huge leaps and tick them off and give yourself credit for doing so. I think sometimes when we don't feel like we're doing enough or doing enough, or we're finding it hard to give ourselves credit, it's because the things that we think we should be giving ourselves credit for are too big.
Yeah.
Whereas if we set some smaller expectations or smaller tasks, it doesn't mean lower your standards by any means. It means set something that you can action straight away and tick it off and create a bit of momentum. Then they're the things that are going to make us feel better and more confident, and have a higher efficacy in what we're doing.
I think that's the perfect point. Like the barrier for what you give yourself credit for is exceptionally high in most cases. And I think for me, that's where the to-do list or the task list for tomorrow, task list for today actually becomes so important, because if you can tick those off, you can look back at the end of the day and go, well, I've just kind of done what I always do. How's that special? That's not special. I'm not special. I'm irrelevant, kind of thing, blah, blah, blah. Negative self-talk, cry yourself into a corner of anxiety and depression, versus going, oh, I've got that done. It's been a productive day. Like, that's actually worthwhile, actually taking stock of, thinking about, sitting on that for a little bit and using that to build momentum.
Yeah. But so this is something that I find really hard to understand. And that's because I'm surrounded by people that do this consciously or subconsciously. But when I speak to some friends or speak to some people that aren't where they want to be in life, or where they want to be in that month or week or day or whatever it might be, that don't have a way of reflecting or a way of journaling or a way of, like, you know what, today's been a good day for this reason, or today's been a bad day for that reason. Do you think we struggle, or there's not enough education, or it's not a social norm to be reflective?
Yeah. I think personally, there are kids in school who have no idea how to deal with emotions. And this is where you see, and they're all, I mean, probably you could call them the TikTok generation. They're being brought up on a bunch of transvestites and LGBT maniacs. And I mean maniacs, not just like, normal people who are in the LGBT community that are, just go around the day-to-day stuff. I mean, the actual fucking lunatics that are on the extreme end of propagating, you're not in the right body, you need a sex change. I mean, like, for me, it's bizarre that that's a concept and that's what people are preaching. I think parents, and I think this is what's going to lead us into kind of like the school situation, coaching, getting healthy kids and physically, mentally robust children to advance and ultimately improve the population, benefit society by being a high quality person. I think a lot of people these days struggle to deal with their emotions. They struggle in a mental and physical capacity. That gets passed on. If you're an anxious parent, you are going to have an anxious child. Makes sense, right? Like, that they're picking up everything, anything and everything that you do, say, think, the way you behave, the subconscious things. I think about the way that I behave with my dog, the things that I'm teaching him, the things I'm showing him, the level of aggression that I bring to the table, like, he picks up on that. And how to behave in every single situation. If you're a small person, you are taking in the world around you. You're observing everything. You're playing with everything. You're touching everything. You're putting worms in your mouth, glue up your nose, all that kind of random shit. Like, that's the kind of person that you are trying to influence as a parent. If you struggle to acknowledge and deal with your emotions, and you lack the self-awareness to go, I'm not happy with this general situation, or how I'm living, or how active we are as a family, or the fact that we're doing the same thing 7 days a week, every single week of the year, month after month, for year on year. I'm not happy with that situation, so I'm going to change it. If you lack the self-awareness to do those kind of things, then it's going to manifest itself in other ways. And I think kids are picking up on it, picking up on anxiety. They're not learning how to talk to people which I think is a big one. They're not learning how to talk about problems, emotions, feelings, thoughts. It's also not okay to be aggressive. It's not okay to be an alpha. You know, everyone's got to be a beta fucking soggy soy boy that sucks insect protein for their meals. Like, grow up.
Something you're passionate on.
Well, it angers me because it is. I know we talk about standards and you don't want to set the bar for entry too high, but like the standards are off a cliff, and it's literally these days I feel like it's unacceptable to remind people of the standards and the potential of each individual person. And you almost get hammered for calling people out and holding people accountable. You know, if you saw some scruffy little scally throwing rubbish on the floor and went, "Oi, what are you doing? Pick it up." They go, "What's up with you, dickhead?" And you go, "Come on, mate, like, don't make me hurt you." So yeah, I think that becomes, and because there's no form for recourse, there's no accountability, schools are literally hamstrung when it comes to disciplining a child, grabbing hold of them and having consequences. You can't shout at a child in school now. Like my missus Fiona, she talks to me about these kinds of things all the time. Like the things that they have to do to dance around obviously unacceptable behavior. And it's because we're all in this free spirit. It's like, oh, they're just expressing who they are. No, they're being a fucking idiot. They need to learn how to behave in society. If we want a society that's got rules and boundaries for how people behave that make us efficient, by the way.
Yeah.
Like having roles in societies make us efficient, believe it or not.
And happier.
And therefore happier. And by the way, you don't also have to pigeonhole people into each role. Like you can pick and choose your role, but you have a fucking role. You don't have to have diversity across everyone. So, for instance, if no women want to go and work on an oil rig, they don't have to. That's cool. It can be all blokes if you want. If you're a woman and you do want to work on an oil rig, go work on an oil rig. Go and have the time of your life. Like freedom to choose, I think, is massively important. But I mean, what a fucking tangent this is. It's one of those things where you have to learn how to deal with your emotions, your behaviors, deal with anxiety, like, and understand that you are going to be put in difficult situations in your life. And that is absolutely fine. If anything, that's normal. That's the way it should be. You need to be fronted up with challenges. If you want to develop as a person, good, you are going to have to go through the shit. It's like training. If you want to become physically strong, how are you going to do that without ever picking up a weight and struggling and suffering a little bit? Not possible. Simply not possible. And I think that we're in a situation where it's becoming acceptable to never have to go through it. And what we're actually going to do as a society is medicate ourselves and tell ourselves everything's going to be all right. I mean, imagine the world blowing up around you. Imagine me and you in a room, right? The world's blowing up around us. It's the zombie apocalypse. You're upset. And I go, there, Josh, come on. It'll be all right. How does that solve a thing? How does that solve fucking anything?
Completely unproductive, isn't it?
Like, you've got two options. You can either go, oh, there. We could comfort each other. Come on, Josh, it'll be all right. Or we can pick up a weapon and we can start fighting. We can start being productive, start doing some shit, build a flamethrower, torch the crap out of them, develop a few little hand grenades, throw some. Do you know what I mean? Like, get a couple of Molotov cocktails over the balcony kind of thing. You can either be productive, you can be disciplined, you can be smart, you can be thinking, mindful, or you can just put a little arm around each other and go, oh, there, it'll be all right. We can complain about it later. I mean, do you think that's a fair assessment?
I can tell you've been watching SAS. But no, it's completely fair assessment, I think. And like, I don't want to talk about this too much because I've absolutely no right to be talking about this in some sense, but I've got clients that work in the NHS and some in managerial roles, and like, we all know what shit show the NHS is going through and how hard it is for them to look after the patients in the way they'd like to, and the systems and processes and funding and everything's such an issue. And this client is telling me about certain situations that they're having to have serious meetings with as a board about like discrimination and people not feeling like they're treated fairly, etc. And like I said, I've got no role to be discussing what's going on in the NHS because I'm not involved in the slightest. But they were getting massively pissed off because the amount of funding it takes to host that meeting and pull all these people out of what they do day to day, even though they're finding it hard to get everything done, to have this talk about one person that's not feeling great about how they're treated within the community, and this person isn't like a typical like hierarchical. I don't know who you'd class as someone in like the top of the food chain person, but you know what I mean.
It would be a white male, probably around 6 foot. That would probably be the person at the top of you, because that's all. Everyone that's at the top is a white, aggressive,
middle class, like
yeah.
You know exactly what I mean. But this person isn't, and it just wants to do the job basically, and they're sat having meetings about the person that doesn't feel too good and the procedures they're going to put in place instead of all just fucking doing the job and putting it to bed.
I mean, did you see about the BBC presenter, radio presenter, who said that he was struggling recently because when he turned up to work, like everyone was white, and I'm like, that is one of the most racist things I've ever heard. Like, what do you expect? Like, just because it's not like diversity is something that should be allowed to occur naturally. I think for me, coming from a background with American football, sport, you know, I think in primary school, there was one black kid in my class, and it was never an issue. I never bothered about it. Never saw color. I never thought, oh, he's different to me. Never thought that. American football, I've never kind of gone, oh, well, all the black guys do that, all the white guys go over there. Like, there's never that segregation. Like, you're all going into battle together, and you're there to play football, you're there to play sport, you're there to compete. And that's literally it. And same in the workplace, you're there to do your job. It doesn't matter what color someone is, what background they're from. And if people turn around and go, oh, well, you just don't understand me, you don't understand my background, it's like, okay, cool. Well, you don't understand mine either. What's the fucking problem? Like, this is what we need to do. Let's get it done. Stop whinging. I don't like the idea of having to shoehorn people into positions purely for the sake of diversity. You can either do the job or you're not good enough.
And to be fair, like if you look at it objectively, it's based on chance, isn't it? How many people are in the area that can do that job and do it well and fit into that position that are of a certain ethnicity? Yeah. Because in one area, that's going to be skewed one way, and in another area, it's probably going to be skewed another way. But if both areas have to have the same amount of, I don't know, certain ethnicities, then you're then going to get rid of like a talent pool of people that could keep that service more efficient. And if it's happening in the NHS, then that's quite a significant resource that everyone relies on and is actually falling short right now of resources and struggling.
Yeah. I think, I mean, it's like, imagine going to the West Indies or Jamaica or the Caribbean or something where there's, you know, like the majority of the population are black, and going, do you know what? I'm fucking sick of all these black people around here. Like, what is wrong with you?
Yeah.
I like to listen to Jordan Peterson talking about a lot of these things because I think he's an elite level psychologist, but he's also a brilliant thinker. Like, you can see when he's getting questioned on things, like he does it very much in the way that you've answered a lot of the questions in this in-depth interview. He takes his time to respond. Like, he actually thinks about the question before he shouts out the answers before the question's even finished. Like, he's very thoughtful and mindful about what he says. And I think he's dead right when it comes to, there are differences between men and women. You know, I feel like we've established that as a race, even though some people want to debate it. I feel like we've established it. And it's not all physical. Like there are some mental differences, like there are different brain structures, some slightly different brain structures. So, for instance, women are typically more caring. Nothing wrong with that. It doesn't mean men can't care, or there aren't some very, very caring men, which means that across the board, the generalization, women are more caring. That's fine. That's why they go into more healthcare professions, teaching professions, like looking after young kids. Like it's a natural thing, a natural role for them to fulfill.
Yeah.
Right. I think if that's the career you choose, right, go and do it. But we don't have to have more men teaching in primary schools. We don't have to have it. So if you've got 5 female primary school teachers and 4 men, and there's one job available, and you've got an equally competent man and an equally competent woman, you don't have to hire the bloke. Or sorry, if you've got a less competent man and a highly competent woman, hire the most competent person. Don't just bother with that. I mean, yeah, I don't know what are your thoughts on that. And in terms of mindset managing clients, like, do you see much difference in the psyche, the psychology, the way they process emotions, the way they deal with situations, the way they think about things?
Yeah, I think the way you can give them, what would you say? The way you can reward them, like from a verbal point of view as well, is massively different. And the way you might program certain things for them, the language that you speak to them in. But I think it is male and female, but you'll have some males with feminine traits and some females with masculine traits. And I think it's understanding the people in front of you and knowing their capabilities and knowing what keeps them ticking in terms of motivation and changing your demeanor based on what that needs to be at the time. I do think it's a masculine, feminine kind of thing, or rather than being all females are treated like this and all males are treated like this. But there is a 90% chance that all my male clients are going to be treated pretty similar, and a 90% chance all my female clients are going to be treated pretty similar, and then some in a grey area. But I also think that's male and female differences. There's also many differences, such as like training age, maturation, like the experience of the person who's in front of you, their goals, values.
When it comes to kind of, I want to go more into the topic of how we can actually help youngsters now. So when it comes to actually training youth population or developing a population of healthy, strong, physically robust, mentally well-off adults, is there anywhere in particular you think we're going wrong at the minute? And is there anything in particular you think we could do to put things on the right track?
From an adult perspective?
No, go with like primary school kids, youngsters. Like obviously, I think I mentioned in one of my previous rants how there's a load of kids in schools that need one-to-one help, or they've got kids off because they've got anxiety, depression, they can't cope with their emotions. You know, they're just struggling.
Yeah.
How do we help them? What can we do?
I think, again, a topic that's probably way out of my depth in terms of experience and knowledge, but I think if I was to put my 2 pennies worth in, I think finding something that the children, well, first of all, discipline that you touched on before is a massive thing, isn't it? If we could create more disciplined children that adhere to a curriculum of some sort, whether that's physical or educational or whatever the curriculum is, I think that's massive, and teaching respect as well. But I think for people of that age, it's hard to teach discipline in a school environment because they're modeling off who they see at home, because they're ultimately the people that they respect the most. I think what we can do in a curriculum is make sure it's things that the children enjoy and engage with, and which won't always be the same thing, because you'll have a classroom of different children. But maybe that's how you know, where, like for certain schools, you have 2 classrooms. You have like maybe a class of 60 kids, so you split them into 2 over 2 teachers. In the bigger schools, maybe that's how you differentiate who's in which class. When they come in, you decide what kind of personality they've got, like what they respond well to, and then, you know, you differentiate classes by that instead of random selection. But in terms of creating more physically or mentally robust children from the offset, I think challenging them to do hard things, even that are enjoyable at first, and teaching them that it's okay, that it's hard, and that we have to complete it anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. I think having that kind of grit mindset and the growth mindset as well, where it's all right for it to be difficult. That's cool. Carry on, finish it, complete the task. I think that's absolutely huge when it comes to pushing that. What about for adults and like the situation with getting people off depression medication, anxiety medication? What are your general thoughts on that? And just to be clear for everyone listening, like we are not condoning going against doctor's advice or prescription stuff, but if you are someone who maybe you know someone that's struggling with anxiety, depression, or you yourself are struggling with anxiety or depression and you're considering going to a doctor, question for you, Josh, is what could you try?
I think there's loads of positive psychology resources that we can benefit from online. Like you've mentioned Jordan Peterson there. Jordan Peterson has so many different podcasts. He has audiobooks. He has resources online such as his self-authoring, in which you can go and actually spend some time working on yourself and understanding who you are, what your past has looked like, what your present looks like, what your future wants to look like, and how we can create harmony between those. And there's another person called Dr. Julie Smith who has she's a psychologist, and her book is something I'd recommend as well, actually. And it's called Why Has No One Ever Told Me This Before? And that talks about stress, anxiety, fear, etc. I actually sent a book review over to like the team that I work with, just because we were doing some book review stuff, so I can send that over to you, Alex. But it's basically using the resources that we've got available to develop ourselves and become, like you said before, more mentally and physically robust people, and spending more time looking after ourselves instead of spending the time that we have on things that we're less passionate about, such as like careers that we don't enjoy, or such as spending time with people that are toxic and draining, or such as spending time in environments that aren't helping us feel better mentally. And all those things are quite hard to do. But again, like you said, the grit mindset or the growth mindset is the things that are hard to do that we do anyway that reap the biggest rewards mentally. So I think there are definitely places to start, and talking to a professional. Like you can talk to a professional before you go to a doctor. And that might be professional in terms of personal training, because a lot of the work we do as personal trainers is working with people to better themselves physically so they can feel better mentally. And a lot of that actually does facilitate better positive psychology. But you can also go and see a counsellor or a therapist or a CBT therapist or whoever it is that you feel like you'll get the most benefit from, and set a structure that's going to help you feel better and do better within yourself.
Yeah, I think that's a really couple of really good points there. Talking to a professional, again, doesn't necessarily have to be a counselor or a therapist, but certainly can be. We were mentioning before about the benefits of exercise and the mindset work, and I think my personal opinion is that exercise will open up your mind. It will for me, I think it's kind of like the key to the gateway. It's like getting the blood circulating, getting the blood flow to your brain, getting your heart rate up, getting your breathing rate up, feeling alive. That for me will open up the door to you to be able to think better, think more clearly. Like there's a reason a lot of the most successful people tout one of their key habits as getting up early, getting a workout in, or getting a workout in at some point during the day. And I know everyone I've ever trained, whenever they've missed a workout and then had to go to work, they felt shit for it. They felt worse off as a result of missing the workout.
Yeah.
You also mentioned about people not being happy in their job, their career, potentially even in their relationship. And we've spoken about courage already on the podcast. And have you got any advice for anyone that might be in that kind of situation? Because I know as a PT, I've for 10 years plus, I've been in that scenario many, many times over. I've seen it over and over and over. And how would you go about that? How would you help someone through that? And if you potentially sat here listening to this thinking, oh, that's me, strap your pants on.
Yeah, I think first of all, talking about it is a massive thing. If you have peers that you are happy to discuss that sort of stuff with, then talking them through it, because they'll often have a different perspective that you might not. In terms of career change, if you're having a tough week at work and you suddenly decide it's time for a career change, it might be that you're just having a tough week with work and a career change might throw everything off. And you might actually find that the career was the best thing you had, like you loved it, and you can't find a better opportunity. On the flip side, if you've been thinking it for quite a while and you feel like your career is not, or relationship are not serving you, and they don't align with your values, and you're not providing what you want to as a service or or in terms of connection, then it might be time for a change. But I think whatever no one will ever tell you what is best. You have to judge that yourself, and that comes down to the courage point of view. You have to be courageous enough to reflect on it, to write down, to make the decision whether you're going to stay and make things better yourself, or whether you're going to have certain conversations yourself, or whether you're going to leave and find something even better. But you ultimately make that choice, and whichever choice you make isn't a right or wrong choice. And it will only be an experience that you can either learn from, or that you can learn from and grow with. And I do truly believe that whatever decisions we make, as long as they're not irrational in the moment decisions, are probably for the best, because we have to take something away from them.
Yeah. From a coach's point of view as well, when it comes to talking about it, if you're a coach, you never force the issue, do you? We kind of go, you might not even bring it up. I think the majority of the time I never even brought it up. I might go, well, is everything all right? And they go,
Yeah.
Something doesn't seem quite right. Is there something bothering you? Yeah, a little bit. I'm just fucked off, blah, blah, blah. I go, okay, well, would you like to talk about it? That as a coach is as far as it goes. You throw out the invitation. Would you like to talk about it? The answer to that will be yes or no. Quite simple. The answer is no. You move on. And it doesn't mean you never talk about it ever again. You never try and bring it up again. But you go, okay, cool. Well, I'm here for you if you decide that you do want to talk about it. Anytime, pick up the phone, drop me a message. It's cool. Because in that moment, you have to be in the right headspace. You have to be in the right state to be able to, like, if you're going to go and divulge your deepest, darkest secrets and start throwing up your nightmares that are bouncing around in your head, you have to be mentally ready to do it. Like, you have to feel like you can let your guard down and then go. So as a coach, never force it. Just open up the opportunity. Just be like, would you like to talk about it? Let's go. Then I think this is crucial. What you said was gain a perspective. You need, if you're trying to assess your situation, we're only ever in the weeds. We're like looking at it straight on, aren't we? If you're that particular person, you're looking at a problem head on. If you've got a coach, or we mentioned before about the possibility of just going seeing a counselor, you've got someone on the outside that can offer more of an external overview. They might throw out some suggestions, even offer a couple of solutions, and then on the ground you can make the decision of, okay, that sounds good, that's not so good, that won't work because of this, so I'm going to do this. And you start to kind of unpick it and find solutions. The one thing that you can't do as a coach, and you said no one will ever tell you what is best, and I think I've written it down as no one can ever tell you what is best. Like, people will tell you, and obviously I think they probably can tell you, but they don't. Well, no one else can ever know what is best. They can think what is best, they can have an opinion on it, they can tell you what they think is best, but you are the only person that can work out that situation, because it's your experience, it's your scenario, isn't it? So finally, as a coach, like offer potential solutions, offer some possibilities. Don't be like, you have to do this.
And I think as well, one of the most beneficial things I've had an experience with coaches and that I feel like I can provide as a coach is just repeating something to someone in the same tonality, in the same expression, in the same sense that they mean it, when they tell you one of their problems and they open up about it, just to let them hear it back and decide whether it makes sense or not, or if it's rational, or they need to think about it from a different perspective.
Yeah, being able to hear your own thoughts is mind-blowing. That's why the journaling is so important. So I think if you write it down, read it out, you actually develop a different relationship with your problem, because you hear it as if it's someone else that's telling you the same. Because like the amount of times where you feel like someone tells you the problem and then you go, well, I hear you and I instantly know the solution. So how the fuck can you not know it? But then you repeat it back and they go, oh, like light bulb goes off. I want to ask you, like, I know we've been on for quite a while now. I want to ask you a couple more little questions. And the first one is there a stigma when it comes to mental health, speaking to a professional? Is there a stigma?
I think so. I think there is a stigma, but I also think there is there's not a lack of opportunity because there's so many places you can go. But I think, like, if you said to me right now, Josh, I think you should go and see a therapist, I'd be like, all right, how the fuck do I do that? What do I do? Do I go online and Google therapist? Because I've done that before, by the way, and it comes up with loads of random people that you don't know have any credibility or not. And like, I don't think it's as easy as people make it out to be to go and see a therapist unless you're in a circle where a therapist is readily available and trusted, if that makes sense. And I have resources where I could go and ask someone for a recommendation or referral, definitely. Especially if you like the sports psychology stuff I've done at uni, I've got like probably a few people I could ask. But I'm thinking from someone that just goes on Google and goes, like, who do I talk to? It'd be quite an overwhelming and scary perspective, and something that they probably wouldn't want to spend too much time researching into anyway. So I do think there potentially is a stigma in terms of we shouldn't potentially talk about our mental health, but I think those barriers are getting dropped quite significantly, especially with everyone becoming a little bit more on board with the concepts and maybe doing like the charity events and talking, especially people that have a higher influence on social media and stuff. But I don't think the problem is necessarily just the stigma. I think it's also how.
Yeah. So when I say, is there a stigma, I mean that in a sense of, if I was to tell you now, if I was to say to you, Josh, I'm seeing a therapist, what would be your initial thought? Would you be thinking, oh, you fucking pussy, like, are you even a man, kind of thing?
Yeah. No, to be honest, like, the first thing I think is, wow, that's amazing. I'd love to know what the benefits are, and I'd love to know how it's helped you, and would you recommend it?
Yeah. So that's what I think as well. So that's where I don't, like, I think I struggle to get my head around why more people don't. I have a coach. You have a coach. I don't feel as if there is anyone out there that wouldn't benefit from having a mentor, a coach, a guide, a therapist, if you want to call them that. I personally don't see why that would be a negative in any way whatsoever. Like, if you'd say, I know obviously they go by the term of therapist, but if you were to go, I'm seeing a mindset coach, I'm thinking, fucking hell, that sounds mint. Like, can I come?
Yeah.
Can I see one?
Yeah.
Same in sport. I'm off to see the sports psych. Oh, sweet. Like, you're gonna figure some shit out. Like, I think good, that's productive. Like, you're starting to understand yourself. So I don't understand where, I don't know whether it is still a problem or whether people are scared of it or they think it's a bad thing. What's your general perspective on that?
On in terms of day-to-day people, I think it's less of an issue. I think we're becoming. I don't know if I'm just in a circle where I think most people would be very accepting of that and would encourage it, and whether outside of that circle of people that I probably spend the most time with, it would be deemed to be something that is for pussies. But in my experience, I think the stigma has dropped, and I think people are more supportive of the fact that people should go and see someone that will help them talk through their problems, or because everyone's got problems. No one's walking around with no problems in their head, and if they are, then I think probably a sociopath. Like, I think there's got to be someone that you outlet to in a productive way that doesn't necessarily involve like judgment or, you know, just the other issue I've got with sometimes people not seeing not seeing therapists or not having a mentor or not a coach or whatever, is that they probably go to their friends who are quite happy to offer advice rather than a listening ear. Like, I think something that we're good at with coaching is we listen to people. We've got 2 ears and 1 mouth. And when people go to the pub and catch up and you hear it all the time, it turns into a gossip or a rant, which is probably somewhat productive. But if someone just wants to, you know, offlet some problems they've got and have someone ask them some questions on it, that's a much different conversation than when the other person is actually putting their opinions and thoughts and judgment on it too.
I love the thought that there is nobody out there walking around with no problems in their head.
There's not, is there?
Exactly that. Like, your problems just change to become slightly different problems. I think one of the analogies that I've always used, and I don't know whether maybe I used this when I was coaching other PTs as an example of like the kind of issues that people face. I was like, you can have 2 people at completely different ends of the spectrum. You could have a homeless person that's got money problems. You can also have a multimillionaire that's got money problems.
Yeah.
And put that in quotes for anyone that can't see it. And it's like, well, what's your money problem? It's like, well, I haven't got any. Okay, well, we can fix that. We can work on like how to get you some. Like, what are your skill levels? What's your ability to serve? What's your ability to help other people? What's your ability to function on a day-to-day basis? And then you tackle that, job done. You go to the multimillionaire, the billionaire, whoever you want. You go, well, what the fuck is your money problem? So, well, I don't know whether to invest it in this or donate it to this charity, and like trying to figure out what to do with it. Maybe it's, what car do I buy next? What fucking house do I buy? It's like, well, mate, your problem's not really a big problem, but you're trying to figure out what to do with it. Okay, cool. Well, we can work around that as well. So every single person out there does have a problem. I think I would absolutely love to sit down and speak to someone that thinks they don't need help.
Yeah.
I would love to dig into that and know what's going on in their head. And just think, oh, so you think therapy is for pussies, do you? Come on then, open up.
Yeah.
Watch
I reckon you're crying in no time.
Oh, I get him weeping like a little baby. I think that's absolutely. I don't know whether we've even covered everything that we set out to cover at the very start. I just know that we've definitely ticked off the question about high rocks. Actually, no, I was going to venture back to that. Actually, completely forgot. So, if you were listening to that at the start, 2 hours later, here you go. Do you think that it's like you mentioned about someone that you know that's doing CrossFit, is quite good at CrossFit, but reckons if they dropped into high rocks, they could instantly be at a very, very high level very, very quickly? Do you think that's because is it because it's still quite a minority sport, or is it just the general level of high rocks athletes? Is high rocks a bit, does it have a stigma? Is it because it is for pussies that people don't want to be associated with that? Is that what it is?
I reckon this person wouldn't want to be associated with high rocks for that reason. But he's also not a CrossFit athlete, he's an endurance athlete, and he's very successful as an endurance athlete. So I think.
Or is it Ben Aiken by any chance?
It is, yeah.
Yeah, there's not a chance he's allowed anywhere near high rocks ever.
Yeah, he wouldn't touch it. But the point being is, like, you're dropping him in from another sport and he will excel. But the argument to that is, in CrossFit at the very start, if you had someone that was a very, very good weightlifter that was already quite fit as well, they would probably excel at CrossFit as well at the start. So give High Rocks 10 years if it lasts that long, then maybe it'll be a different story. Maybe the testing will be a little bit more, I don't know, diverse. Maybe it'll stay the same. Who knows?
Maybe get a squat run at 1RM in there, maybe something.
Yeah.
Some sort of strength work will be good.
Yeah, but then I guess it's what the name suggests. Is it? I don't actually know much around High Rocks in terms of what their mission statements are, but if their goal is, if they're literally saying in their slogan, we are testing people for ultimate fitness on running 1K, pushing a sled and pulling a sled and lunges maybe or whatever else in there, then they're bang on the mark. But who actually wants to test that? Why is it interesting? Like, it's not mixed modality and it's not a specialism. It's actually just a couple of things that endurance athletes would be good at, like in that capacity, and testing it. So it's great for the ego for those people, but like, you've already got endurance events for that we've been running for a long time in different disciplines such as swimming, running, cycling, etc. So why would you not just do those? Or if you want a mixed modal version, if you want something that's a little bit more concurrent, if that's the word you'd use, then go and do some CrossFit. And then if you want to isolate it down to strength or, you know, power, then do a powerful based sport or weightlifting or powerlifting or whatever it needs to be.
Yeah.
But it seems just very select. It seems like the weekend warrior kind of people that would be very good at that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And I think
which is fine for them.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. So by the way, I know we called you all pussies if you do High Rocks, but like if that's kind of the way that you want to go, that's cool. That's fine. Go and do High Rocks. There's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. I do think it is actually, when I first heard about it, because obviously it is still quite new. And I remember I slated CrossFit for years, still do.
Yeah. I was going to say, you can call everyone pussies for whatever they do.
Yeah. Like bodybuilders, especially bodybuilders. They're the worst of all.
They are pussies.
Yeah. I think there's obviously very different cultural aspects across loads of different sports. And I do quite like the way that High Rocks works in the sense that it is very cardiovascular based. It's very, very simple. There's very few bits of kit. Like you say, it is all engine work. There's loads of VO2 max, plenty of lunging, some fundamental strength, like being able to push a sled. You know, it's like pushing a heavy shopping trolley. Very useful. And
functional.
I think it is like a very low level barrier to entry for anyone that does want to feel fitter, feel the breathing a bit more. And like you mentioned, the weekend warriors, you know, the tough mudder people, you know, it might be something that attracts those a little bit, and we'll see as it evolves. Because it is, I think, part of the reason that certain people can just drop in or out of any sport, whether it's triathlons, Ironmans, or whatever it is, the popularity as it is, with it being a new sport, the pool of people interested and the prize money isn't necessarily at a world-class level, so it's just not attracting a megaton of people, and means that you can automatically do quite well whilst being relatively average, I suppose.
Yeah,
which there's nothing wrong with that. Just
no,
the selection of competition. We have talked, I feel like we've gone pretty in depth today. I don't know about you.
It's been an intense chat, hasn't it?
I've enjoyed it.
Different avenues.
Yeah. I want to ask you about, before you go, your top book recommendations and or podcasts. So I always go with like a top 5. So any balance that you'd like to get within those. I know you've already mentioned a couple. Like, obviously, people should definitely go and check out Jordan Peterson. He seems to come up in every episode I discuss with people. And you mentioned about Dr. Julie Smith? Was it her?
Yeah. So I have actually, what I'll do is I'll talk about them in order of what we've talked about today, because I think that'll be quite helpful. So I think first and foremost, the Dr. Julie Smith book is a really accessible way to learn a little bit more about positive psychology, and that's called Why Has Nobody Told Me This Before? It's a new book, and she's got an awesome Instagram profile as well for certain people that might relate to that kind of stuff. I don't, but it's very, very practical, and She talks about stress, anxiety, PTSD, grief, fear, whatever it is, and how to deal with it, and even make the most of it, maybe. On that topic, there is a less accessible, more research-based paper called The 6 Pillars of Eudaimonic Wellbeing. It's by Carol D. Riff, and I think it was written in 2006. And that's the 6 Pillars of Eudaimonic Wellbeing, which basically is positive psychology versus, it's like a long-term, long-lasting happiness versus like short-term happiness. And she compares a lot of her theories to like short-term gratification, like buying a new car. You feel happy. How long do you feel happy for? A couple of weeks while you're driving it. When does it wear off? Straight after those couple of weeks, it's just a car again. Like, that's not happiness. Happiness is building a fulfilling life around the things that are most important to you. And that paper talks a lot about it. So if you are interested in positive psychology, or like maybe helping other people with positive psychology, that'd be a paper that I think is really valuable. Onto the mental fortitude side of things, I think you'll get on board with this, but Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink is a great book in terms of taking responsibility for yourself, your actions, your feelings, your emotions, everything that will contribute to you becoming a more physically and mentally robust person. And then leading on from that, which is a bit more business related or success related, is Relentless by Tim Grosvenor, which is a great book which talks about being relentless as a mindset and attitude to succeeding. So if you are a person that wants to like succeed in business, fitness, whatever it might be, like your own personal accomplishments, then Relentless is a good perspective. Probably a little bit on the extreme end sometimes, but there's no harm in that. And then finally, there's a couple of podcasts that I was going to recommend based on us talking about training stuff, but we didn't actually talk too much about training and movement and mechanics and stuff like that. But the first one was Training Think Tank, which is a CrossFit-based podcast that have a lot of CrossFit perspectives on fitness, but they talk about other stuff like wrestling, grappling, and like loads of stuff fitness related. And then the last one was the Training Stimulus, which is a movement mechanics podcast with Ash Grossman. And there's another lad, I forgot who he hosts it with. But basically they talk about like different elements of movement, progression, periodization, like strength and conditioning based stuff from a CrossFit perspective, but also from an athletic perspective as well. So how to become an athletic person and the problems associated with that.
That's wicked, mate. I appreciate that. I appreciate you doing my job as well and structuring it in that set order. That's absolutely class. I was going to say, you know, the Relentless book by Tim Grover. Have you read his second one as well, called Winning?
No, not yet.
I'd highly recommend that. And also, if you're listening to this, I would definitely recommend that as well. Very good book. I think he makes a lot of points in both books, and there's just the amount of times I just thought, do you know what? It makes so much sense. And
Yeah.
by reading it, you get the sense, you get the understanding of this is how winners behave. Like, if you don't feel motivated, doesn't matter. This is how winners behave. This is the standard. This is what they do. Go and be about that, or you ain't gonna be the one. Simple.
Yeah.
And I quite like that in his book Relentless that you mentioned. I quite like in that. Like, he's got a list of things, hasn't he? Where of the 3 types of people, you got coolers, closers, and cleaners.
Cleaners, yeah.
Haven't you? And he breaks each one of those down quite nicely and the personality traits with them. And he also goes into, with his list, his bullet points, like every single one is number 1. Like, they're all equally important. Just fucking do that. Love that.
Which is a cool concept.
Yeah. I mean, there were, I think that was one of the books where I actually gave them out to all my clients as like Christmas presents. So Tim, you got a mint out of me off that.
Yeah. Endorsed.
Oh, he's made some money off me. But yeah, very, very useful, very, very good books, very good recommendations. I'm going to go and check out some of those that you recommended as well. But that's absolute class. I apologize we didn't get a chance to talk too much about your training. I know we got a little bit into your space, but
That was good.
Honestly, I think we've done probably like nearly 2.5 hours, 2 hours 15, something like that. So really, really appreciate you giving up that amount of time for me today. It's been absolutely wicked to speak to you. I could easily do this on a regular basis. If you want to come and join in as a co-host, because Chris doesn't seem to be bothered anymore. If you want to come and join me as a co-host, we can chat on a regular basis.
Yeah.
Tell him I said that.
Yeah. I'd love that. Sounds great.
But I'll definitely get you back on for another proper training chat. We'll have to try and do like a group training chat at some point when Chris is worked out where he is on planet Earth.
Yeah, I'll drag him in.
Yes, that would be useful. That would be very useful. Anyway, mate. Oh yeah, tell the wonderful listeners where they can find you on social media.
I only use Instagram at the minute, so at Josh Reilly Fitness. Reilly is spelled Reilly. And you will see some posts about tennis, strength conditioning, about PT, about my life, my training, and what I get up to.
Go follow, peeps. I will tag that in the show notes as well. I'll put the links to everything that you mentioned in the show notes. And if there's anything you think of after, mate, that you want me to add to the show notes, let me know. And yeah, once again, thank you for coming on. And I'll see you again soon.
Awesome. Cheers, Alex.
And that concludes episode number 81 of the Lenko Show with Josh Reilly. I hope you've enjoyed listening to this one today. It's been an absolutely mint one from my perspective, just to sit down with him and talk. I suppose talk all things mindset, not even necessarily training, nutrition, or any of the other stuff. So I was saying to him off recording just then that what we're going to try and do is get him on with Chris at the same time, and the three of us will just talk pure training, nutrition, and do a very deliberate one based around that. But hopefully you've taken loads from this, loads from different mindset perspectives and how you can deal with certain situations and work through adversity. So from my point of view, really, really valuable podcast. Hopefully you've seen it the same way as well. If you have enjoyed it, please leave a review. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss any more. If you want to get in touch with me on social media, Instagram is probably the best way to do it. I'm always open to talking on there. And make sure you subscribe to my weekly newsletters as well, my weekly emails, where I send out as much information as I possibly can regarding mental well-being, how to deal with stressful situations, athlete mindset, just being a winning person overall. Like that's basically what I'm trying to do. Develop you into the best possible winning person that can take on anything. That's the objective. So until next time, that is it from me. I will see you again soon. Lenko out.